We are live. Hello, hello. Elisa Meredith here. Glad to have you for the show that I am calling Visual Marketing for All. That's how you can find it if you want to look on your podcast finder. Today, we are going to be talking about how to scale and productize your consulting business. And I have with me a very special guest from Ireland, Alastair McDermott. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I'm thrilled to. Now, okay, make sure I get this right, that you're a marketing consultant, business coach, the host of the Recognized Authority podcast and the Specialization Podcast. And what you do to help people is you help people become that recognized authority so that you can make impact, but also command higher fees, which is always good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And work with better clients as well.
Absolutely.
That's a big one. Yeah.
So we have some friends here. Welcome, Brian. Good evening to you. It's afternoon over here, but I'm sure Alastair's well into the evening.
Yeah, it's 7 p.m. here.
Yeah, hey, and Jeff is giving us a little Texas greeting. Howdy, everyone.
Good to see you, Jeff. I love the beard.
It is epic.
I have beard jealousy.
Epic beard. I know. When I met him, it was just a little yeared, which is what he called it. He only had it for a year. But now, Jeff, let me know. I think it's been about 8 years now. It's his brand. He's forever will have a beard. But anyway, we are here to pick your brain about how to grow a consulting business. And I admit that this is a little bit selfish on my part because that is something I'm working on. But I'm hoping that all of you wonderful people watching are curious about the same thing, want to build your business, want to charge, command higher prices, right? And work with better people. So please, as we're talking, drop your questions, comments, whatever into the chat, and we will make sure to talk about those. Cool. Okay, let's start with basics.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a freelancer and a consultant?
About 2.5. I would say maybe even up to 10 in terms of how much more you can charge if you call yourself a consultant.
Okay. Is it a matter of just calling yourself?
I think in part it's the label.
Okay.
And in part it's a difference in mindset. You move up the value chain. I think a big part of it is, so when you start out, you're a commodity. And you're replaceable with the next guy. Right. Somebody else can just slot in and take your place. It's like staff augmentation. You particularly get this when you see people working as freelancers and they work with agencies who do the same thing that they do. And so they come in to help out an agency on a project where they're kind of understaffed. And the agency knows what you do. And they can easily find other people like you. So they just view you like a commodity. So if you're billing yourself as a freelancer, you're effectively saying, I'm a commodity. And so it's just really hard to charge more because of that. Whereas if you say, I'm a consultant, that's kind of a euphemism for saying I'm an expert. And so in part, it's just, I'm taking myself more seriously and I'm taking you more seriously as the client, and I'm going to provide you more value.
Okay. Does that have anything to do with the services that you offer? So does a consultant necessarily offer more advanced services or more consulting and strategy than execution? What's the difference there?
Yeah, and that's a big one. So typically there's a few different stages. So there's the initial diagnostic stage where somebody figures out, what the actual problem is here. And then after diagnosis, there's prescription. Here's the solution, and then there's implementation. And then after implementation, there's usually maintenance. And as you go down that kind of progression, it becomes less valuable. It's easier to bring somebody in to replace you. So the higher up the food chain that you start, the higher up that ladder, the more value that you can provide. So a lot of people are brought in as consultants. They're brought in after the project has been decided by somebody else as here's what we're doing, and you're just brought in to execute. Yes. And at that point, it's very hard to get your ideas taken seriously if you want to change something, because you're not that person. You're just brought in to be a pair of hands to do the work, do the implementation. And whereas if you had entered the relationship higher up that ladder, if you had entered at the diagnosis stage where you're brought in, okay, can you help us figure this out and then prescribe a solution, and then you can decide whether you want to implement or not. But that's it, that, you know, and that's a separate project even, you know. So it really depends on where you enter that relationship, and it's hard to move up the ladder. It's much easier to move down the ladder.
That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned mindset, and I can see that, right? It's about thinking about where you want to fit. Do you want to be that consultant, or do you want to be the freelancer? Is it a matter of how you present yourself? Like, tell me, I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but but what would be the difference in the way I present myself as a consultant versus a freelancer? Say, let's say I'm posting something on LinkedIn. Can you give us an example of what would be the difference to kind of put myself in one position rather than the other?
Yeah, I think it changes how you approach the conversation. So if you go in as a freelancer, you're saying, here's what I can do for you. Tell me which of these things you need. Whereas if you go in as a consultant, you say, let's have a conversation and figure out what your problem is. And let's see if we can figure out what the best solution is for you. And it's just a different kind of mindset in that you're taking a step back, and you're not saying, you're not asking the client to direct you. You're taking charge of that conversation. Like, for example, if you go to your GP, to your local doctor, when you go in there, they start asking questions. They don't immediately say, oh, looks like you've got a limp, here's some, whatever drugs they prescribe. They start to ask you questions. And so it's that same type of relationship where they're trying to figure things out, so it's not, whereas a freelancer might go in and say, it looks like you need a logo, so here's my pricing sheet for logos, and not really dig into the kind of the behind the scenes of what the issue is,
Okay. All right. I think we got it. Let me know if you guys are all clear on freelancer versus consultants. I think pretty much want to be in the consultant space, right? You mentioned how much more you can charge.
It's moving along that spectrum from being a commodity. I mean, you want to move away from being a commodity, being like everybody else. If you're like everybody else, then the only difference that they have to go on is price. And you really don't want to be in that argument, because that's just the worst place to be.
Absolutely. Okay. So how do you find your first customers as a consultant?
That's tough. And the initial times are different than after you're more established. So when you're starting out, you do have to hustle, you have to scramble, you have to do everything that you can to bring in clients and to bring in cash flow so that you get out of a place of scarcity. Because what happens at the start is you need cash, and you will take pretty much any job that comes along. And you've got to move away from that as quickly as possible. This way, I think it's a good idea. If you have the choice and you want to start a consulting business, is to stay and build up a nest egg of cash first, so that you have some runway for yourself, because that gives you the power to say no to bad projects. And that's really important. So you've got to get yourself into the situation where you can say no to poor fit projects as quickly as possible. But to answer your question specifically, how do you get those first? It's usually through networking. It's usually by letting everybody know what you do and having a really clear value proposition, a really clear positioning statement that people will understand. This is who you help and this is what you do. So it's really clear what the value is that you can provide for somebody, and that they can very easily identify who it is you're looking for. So if they know somebody that they can actually say, oh yeah, this is somebody I can refer you to. But at the start, you'll be doing that through networking. But you want to move past that initial scramble, as quickly as you can. So to get yourself onto a more stable footing where you're able to say no to jobs that are bad fit clients, bad fit projects, low value, take up a lot of your time and energy, and don't give you the time and energy that you need to kind of work on the longer term, which is, building up your authority and expertise and things like that.
Anybody out there had a bad fit customer that they regretted from the moment you signed? Me. Yes, absolutely. I think we all go through that learning stage, figuring out who's a good fit or not.
Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt too many times, I'm afraid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I say all this with from a place of experience. So every mistake that I mention on here, I have made it. So
yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right. Well, that makes you the recognized authority, right? You've done it.
well, I'm not self-ordaining. That's the name of the show because that's the place that I want to bring my clients to. That's the place I want to help people to. That I want to bring them from this place where they're an invisible expert. They're really good at what they do, but nobody really knows them. And I want to take them on that journey to where they become the recognized authority in their field. And that journey is, it's difficult. There's some really hard things to do along the way. But that's what I want to help people with. So I'm not self-ordaining as the recognized authority. I just want to make that clear. Because I think one of the things,
if someone else says that about you.
Yeah, it is okay if somebody else says that.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay, so you mentioned networking. How do you figure out where your ideal clients are? Like, are they online at a specific place online? Are they local? Like, how do you figure this out?
I think the first thing you got to do is you got to figure out, so who are the people I really love to work with? Who are those ideal clients? And that, that's not an easy thing to figure out. You got to, and you usually have to have done that hustle at the start where you do lots of different types of projects, including some bad fit clients, because you have to be able to decide who your ideal clients are from a position where you have some experience of that. So you can say, well, I don't like working with those people because this happens, but I do love working with these people. Sometimes it's because you have a family, like you have a family history where they're all your family are dentists. So you love working with dentists because of that. There's sometimes there's things like that. Or sometimes, you were in college doing one thing and then you changed to doing something else, but you still have lots of contacts in that area. And so there might be some sort of connection, but you've got to figure out who that ideal client is. And then you've got to map out where they might be hanging around. And if you make certain choices in your niching down, which is something that you can do. But if you make certain choices, you can make it much easier for yourself.
True. Yeah. And Brian is saying the same principle applies to my business and how not to be seen as a commodity as a wedding photographer. That's the work I feel I need to do at the moment. My former clients do a good job of this for me, but I need to do it too. Very good.
Yeah.
Brian says we need the bad customers to help us figure out where the good ones are.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it'd be nice to learn the easy way, but I don't know if anyone does.
It would be. Experience makes you better.
It does. You're right.
And that's and experience is usually making mistakes. So how do you get better? You make mistakes.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
it is great when it's great when you can read books and watch live streams and things like this, that so you can learn from other people's mistakes as well and learn from other people's experience. That really is good. But there is a certain element of you have to make some of those mistakes yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say we've figured out that our ideal customer is conveniently on LinkedIn. How do you recommend someone who is unknown but wants to become more known interact once they get there?
Okay, so what I talk to people about is exposing their expertise. So taking them from being that invisible expert to being recognized, to being visible. And so in part, it's got to be about publishing. Now, if we take a step back to who the ideal client is, it's really difficult. And this is where I got into this whole world of expertise and authority and specialization. I got into this because I was trying to write blog posts and I was trying to plan a podcast back in 2014, 2015, 2016. And I failed miserably. And I couldn't understand what the problem was. And I dug into it more and more. And then I realized that the big problem was I was trying to write blog posts that was online marketing and website advice for every type of business. And it was just impossible to do that because it's like one of my clients was a quarry. They had trucks that dug out rock. And,
stone quarry.
Another client was a retirement planning company. Another client was a society for dentistry for children. Another client was a magician that did birthday parties. And so how do you write blog posts for all of these people that gives them advice that's on point? The answer is you don't. So what I realized was I had a lack of specialization problem. So I needed to specialize or to niche down. And as I dug more and more into that, I love the cats.
You're out of control.
as I dug more into the problem, and I realized this specialization thing seems to be a key that unlocks a lot of different things. And I started to niche down, and I picked consultants as my favorite type of client to work with. And so I initially called it marketing for consultants. And the reason I called it that rather than websites for consultants, because I found that a lot of these consultants didn't value their websites. And so I started to do some research. I started to talk to a lot of them. And I did surveys. I surveyed over 1,000 consultants about their websites, about their online marketing, about lots of different things, about their business development. And so what that showed me was that gave me this deep understanding of their problems, their marketing, how they view business development. And it just gave me like this level of insight that was totally different to what I would have had before, even when I was serving the same clients. It was just like a much deeper level. And that's what specialization gives you. So I think the first step is to actually specialize, to niche down. And actually, I created a whole audio course on this. I just made it into a podcast and put it up. It's an evergreen podcast. It's called the Specialization Podcast. And so I made that because specialization is a thing that I think more people need to use. It's a tool that can really help. But also, I think a lot of people are afraid of it for good reason, because there's a lot of fears involved with specialization. This fear of turning away business. With the fear that maybe I'm going to get bored, the fear that you're going to pick the wrong thing. So there's a lot of fears with it. But if you do specialize and niche down, suddenly everything else becomes easier. Because then, if I can go back to your question about like what you post on LinkedIn, well, you post about your client's problem that you know about, and you post you post continually about different ways of solving that problem and digging into that problem and explaining that problem. And those clients will see that you understand it in the same way that like somebody watching this, or even you, when you're listening to me talking now, you know that I get the problem. If you're experiencing this problem, there's anybody watching this, like, you know that I understand it because you hear me talking about it. And it's the same way. It's like when you create some content and put it up on LinkedIn, if it's digging into your client's problem, they will resonate with that and they will want to talk to you about it. So that's how it is, but it's not easy because it does have this dependency on niching down and specializing. That's the real difficulty, I think.
Yeah, we had a great show on that with Rich Brooks last week. If you missed it, go back and check that out. Okay, so you're talking about then just kind of really basically like content marketing, right? Just putting that content out to attract your ideal customer. Is there anything that you do that or recommend that is a little bit more, I don't know, more like taking the initiative to reach out, like a little more outbound?
No, actually, I'm not into outbound at all.
Okay.
What I'll say is there is a place for outbound, which is those first few years when you're scrambling and you gotta make stuff happen. I do believe in it then, but I did a training course with a sales trainer one time, and he told us at the start that his job was to get 79 no's and 1 yes every day, and like every day, yeah. And I read another stat recently that like the average outbound sales person leaves 300 voicemails every week. And I'm like, oh my God, can you just imagine? Like, it sounds like nightmare to me.
It's soul crushing. Yes.
I would much rather be writing blog posts, doing LinkedIn lives, or coming on live streams like this. That's just so much, feels like such a much better use of my time, and a much better way to do marketing. So yeah, I like to think of content marketing as education marketing, because you're educating the client, or even authority marketing, because basically you're demonstrating your authority, your expertise. So if you think of them in those ways, I think it makes a bit more like in our business, typically we don't do content marketing to entertain. It's great if we can add some entertainment value into it. But I think that it's not primarily about entertainment. It's primarily about educating the client so that, they learn a bit more and they say, okay, that's the person we want to work with.
Okay, that makes total sense. Okay. Now, I stalked your blog and your podcast notes to get some of these questions. So,
okay.
So this one made me real curious, right? So how can we work with competitors to get more business?
Okay. So, well, interesting.
It seems so
first,
backwards. Okay.
Yeah. So the first thing is, if you're specialized, if you're properly specialized, you probably don't have any true competitors. You have people who are working in the same area, but they're probably not direct competitors. And it's much easier to have people who you work with. So I'll give you an example from my past. When I was doing web design and online marketing, I was doing for every type of business that came across my door. So I was doing Facebook ads, websites, Google AdWords. And so if I met somebody who was a consultant in, say, Google AdWords, I would have viewed them as a competitor. Whereas now when I'm not doing that, if I meet that same person, they're now a potential ally. They're a potential referral. There's somebody I can work with. We might collaborate to make a training course together, or to, do a live like this or something like that. You don't see them as a competitor because you're not competing anymore. And even then, in the very rare occasions where there is somebody who is an absolute direct competitor, I've even had some of them on my podcast. I've had Jonathan Stark, Philip Morgan, Luke Smeyers, Brad Farris, and all of those could to some degree, Rochelle Moulton, all of those could to some degree be seen as direct competitors. But on the other hand, we're all kind of talking to slightly different people, and the people who are out there listening to us, some of them, if somebody wants to work on specialization and they have a choice between me and Philip Morgan, it's going to be very clear to them, either they like Alastair's style or they like Philip's style, because we're chalk and cheese. We have a very different approach to it. And so they're going to like one or they're going to like the other. It's, I think it's going to be pretty clear. I'm a bit more boisterous, and Philip is kind of very calm and relaxed, and, so and not saying he's not authoritative. He is, and I'd like to think that I am coming across that way too, but it's just a different style. And so I think that people will make that choice based on that, So it's
for sure.
So it's, if you look at your competitors as allies with the same mission, it makes life a bit more pleasant. You also need to not be coming from that place of scarcity. So that's about mindset as well. And I like to use the example of, in terms of the number of clients that I need, I'm standing under the Niagara Falls, and I have a small glass that I need to fill up. And so if there's somebody else standing under the falls with me as well, and they're filling their glass, it's not going to hurt me.
Right.
So like there's plenty of business out there. So, it's just, I think a lot of it is about mindset as well.
Completely agree. I have to say, in the space that I'm in most of the time, which is Pinterest marketing, people are incredibly generous. I was just in a private Zoom call with Megan Williamson this morning. She has a paid group, and she brought me in to just kind of partner with and do a session, which I don't know if that happens in every industry, but I think having an understanding of like how social works is really helpful to know that, there really is no competition. We're just all...
Yeah, well, I've noticed it because I came from the world of web design. And I've noticed that in web design, in the creative space, there's much more collaboration than there is in the world of consultants. It doesn't seem to have the same level of kind of, we're all in this together. I don't know what it is about the creative industries, but there is a bit more of that. And I really like that, actually. It's something that I want to keep and I want to continue to work in,
Fabulous. Okay. All right. So how then you've had a couple of clients, you figured out who you like. How do you get referrals? I feel a little bit funny sometimes asking people.
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, there are ways to ask for referrals. There are ways to, you can tell your clients, look, I get most of my business from referrals. So what I want to do is I want to do a great job for you, so much so that you will tell all your friends about working with me. And you tell them that from the outset.
I love
And
that.
then when you get to the end of the project, it's much easier to say, hey, remember when I told you this? I hope that you feel that it's been a great project, and that you would be willing to tell a few people about working with me. So that's one way that I would go about it. But I do personally, I'm not a fan of referrals in general. I think that too many people are dependent on them as the primary means. I mean, in my research, between 95 and 99% of consultants depend on referrals for their business. Yeah. And the problem with referrals is if your network dries out, you're in trouble because you don't have any other system. Sometimes people refer you, and they were referring you the wrong types of clients. And I've had that in the past where I've been referred, and they're just like, I really do appreciate that they think of me, but they're just not good fit clients, and I can't take on the project. And sometimes that can even result in somebody being a little bit offended and awkward. Yeah. So, and there are things you can do to try and like educate them about the type of referrals. But yeah, I think it's dangerous to rely just totally on referrals. So what I prefer to do is the authority building, authority marketing, content marketing, whatever way you want to describe it. In our space, it's definitely about authority. It's about building your authority, being seen as the go-to person in one specific area. So that's my go-to. There are those three big buckets. There's outbound, there's referrals, which is the biggest. Then there's outbound, like cold calling, email, LinkedIn messages, all that kind of stuff. And then there's inbound, and inbound is my tool of choice for this.
Yeah, I have to. Me too. I would rather do something that is helpful and that people want and actually come looking for than something that may interrupt and annoy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you have a choice in terms of your marketing, if your marketing is going to a meeting every Friday morning at 6 a.m., which some people do, that's like BNI is typically like that. If that's the way that you like to do marketing, then that's fine. I like go for it. My preferred way of doing marketing is opening up Google Docs or my phone notes or my dictation and talking to myself and making notes and trying to figure things out and having conversations like this one. Like that feels to me like a much nicer way to do marketing. It doesn't really feel like marketing to me, to be honest. It's it's just much more pleasant.
Agreed. Okay, so we all know in all business, it's much less expensive and much easier to get repeat business than to go out and find a new customer, a new client. But I don't always feel like that happens organically. So how can we make it happen that we keep working with our best clients over and over?
Well, if you can create a product or service that has an ongoing component, that's what you really need to do. I mean, monthly recurring revenue, it's kind of the it's like the holy grail.
Yes.
Is there a way for you to continuously provide a lot of value to your clients to help them with their problem? Now, I will link you to an article by David C. Baker, who writes a lot about expertise and creative businesses. But he talks about, sometimes recurring revenue can be dangerous because over time, what can happen is your relationship with your client, it starts to get more and more familiar, and familiarity breeds contempt, as the phrase goes. But they start to treat you as more like an employee, and so that can happen over time. So it isn't always ideal. Not to say. I mean, like I know that he talks on his podcast, Two Bobs with Blair Enns. He talks a lot about there's a typical amount of client turnover that you should have.
Huh.
You should lose, X amount of X% of your clients every year. There should be, as your business grows and changes and develops over time, I can't remember what that number is. It might be 8% or something like that. But so if you've got 10 or 12 clients, that might mean that you lose 1 or 2 clients every year, and that's typical turnover.
Yeah.
So I think there is something natural there.
Okay.
But if we're doing high value projects, then that's okay. The worst is if you're doing one-off low value projects. That's the real problem. So,
yes.
And that's where I look at productized services and packaging, and particularly for Brian, for the photographer. Anybody in photography, I think having fixed price packages is the way to go. Custom stuff is it. That's when people will start to fight back on pricing a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think as I've gotten back into consulting, that's been a goal of mine, is to not ever write a custom proposal ever again.
Oh yeah. and if you do, I would suggest that you get Blair Enns' book, Pricing Creativity, which will cost you at minimum $100, because I think that's the cheapest he has it for.
Oh my goodness!
And it's worth it. Yeah, he has actually priced it as he. But in there, just to give you like a preview, in there he talks about having your pricing always offer 3 options. Offer them the basics that they want, something in the middle, and then the bells and whistles. Like if you won the lottery, here's what we would do. And then he talks about how to actually how to have the conversations, the value conversation. There is a thing called value pricing. I spoke with a guy called Ron Baker, who's kind of the godfather of value pricing, and that's where you link your price to the value that the client will actually get from the project being complete, and so you'll take a percentage of that. And usually, the value price projects are significantly more in terms of pricing than if you'd had quoted them without doing value pricing. If you based on time and materials basis. So. But if you can make it work, and it's difficult to actually have those conversations, the value conversation, but if you can make that work, that could be very lucrative.
That's a great episode on the Recognized Authority podcast. If anyone's looking for a new podcast, that would be a great one to start with. It's the same principle though as like a SaaS company, like a software company with subscriptions, right? They always have that basic. And then they have the mid-tier that's usually called out as like the best deal. And then they have the super expensive one that you can't afford. Yeah. So same thing for
and the purpose of that one, of the high level one, is to make the other ones look cheaper, and yes. when you offer 3 options, quite often people will go for the middle option. Nobody ever buys the cheapest bottle of wine in a restaurant. They always buy the second cheapest, so
that's right.
That's the article from David C. Baker about monthly recurring revenue, and that's an interesting read if anybody's interested in why it mightn't be as good.
That's so interesting. Okay, so we talked. There's a lot in there. I'm still intrigued by the expression "chalk and cheese."
Okay. I thought that was a well-known phrase.
I don't think I've heard it before, but I love it. Okay, so thinking about recurring services, I think we can all agree that usually it's a good idea, right? To get that great customer coming back. So what kind of examples have you seen where people have figured out how to do this that we might kind of get some ideas from?
So some productized recurring services might be like every so in your world, I guess it could be something like, we'll post 20 Pinterests every month for you, and that's going to cost you X, or we'll be available to do strategy consulting over email, and that will cost you $500 a month, and we guarantee to reply within 24 hours to your emails, or some sort of ongoing retainer type relationship. There has to be a clear value for the client, and it has to be something ideally that is higher up the food chain. So it's up in the strategy area rather than implementation. That's better if you can do that. For all the reasons that it's just better to be in that area than to be down the way.
I think the only maybe exception to that might be if you're looking to build an agency model, right? So then you bring that in and then you have someone else do it.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, like, everything that I've been talking about is purely from the point of view of consultants and experts who want to be authorities. And I think that agencies will take a slightly different approach. That was never the approach that I personally wanted to take. But sure, yeah, like you would probably take a different approach with that. And yeah, that wasn't something I wanted to do with my business. I always wanted to go down the kind of the expert model route.
Okay.
So
that makes sense. So we've talked a little bit about mindset, but I think there's one that especially new consultants, and some of us never get over it, is that feast or famine pattern where you either have so much work you can't handle it, or you're panicking that you're never going to have any work ever again. So how do you get out of that?
The first thing you probably need to do, you first need to get out of the scarcity mindset and that can sometimes be just a mindset thing, or sometimes it means that you actually need to do those. You need to somehow build up that nest egg. But once you're able to, you've got to turn down bad fit projects. You absolutely have to, and ideally start to increase your prices. So like start to, every time you give a quote, add 10% more on. And just keep doing that. Or if you're not charging enough, I have never met a consultant or designer or freelancer or anybody who I felt that they couldn't immediately double the prices. Almost everybody is undercharging.
And do they all argue with you? They say, I can't do that.
Oh yeah, because there's such a fear-based thing, you know. It's like, double my prices. Oh my God, I'd lose half my clients. It's like, yeah, that's exactly it. You'll lose half your clients. You'll have the same amount of money, and you get half your time back. And that's it. So increasing your prices just gives you this power to do other things. And then once you can increase your prices, you have more time because you're not scrambling around doing lower value projects. You're able to sit back and say, okay, now I can do something that is on the important, not urgent quadrant, because that's the quadrant that we always forget about. That's the quadrant that always gets put aside. Do you want to create a YouTube series? Do you want to create a podcast? Do you want to write a book? You never have time for any of those things if you're running around doing those lower value projects when you're in that kind of feast or famine cycle. So you have to, and I know it's hard to build up that initial first nest egg so that you can afford to say no, but you have to get yourself to the position where you can say no. Once you get to that position, you're in a totally different kind of state, and that will allow you to move on.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right, you did something a year ago that I don't think I would ever do. And that is, you created a live show every single day.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? What did you learn from it? Would you ever do it again?
Okay. I did it because I was really pissed off at myself.
Okay.
So I was really annoyed. So I don't know if you guys use that word in that same way as we do over here, but I was really annoyed at myself because I had been planning podcasts and stuff for a long time. And I finally got myself in 2019. I finally got myself to the place where, okay, now I can start to do lots of content. I now have a clear vision of who my ideal client is. I've specialized down. I know what I want to talk about. I've done lots of work on this. So now is the time. And then COVID happened, and suddenly I was crazy busy. And so there were some days where I had 18 calls a day, and that would be like a regular thing, like 3 days, 4 days in a week.
Wow.
And because I was working with my local enterprise office, which is like it's like the state enterprise support agency here. And so I was working with them, and they support small businesses. And of course, everybody realized in March 2020, we need to get online. Suddenly, after the internet being around for 25, 30 years, suddenly now we need to get online.
Right this second.
And so they had me help out with a lot with that. And so I did a lot of work where I was working basically 10, 12 hours a day, from March to about October.
Oof.
And I totally burned out. And I said at the start of September, I gave them a month's notice. I said from the 1st of October, I'm going to stop doing all of this enterprise support stuff. I'm going to take a break from it. I'm just totally burned out now.
Mhm.
So I did that in October, and I took a rest for a bit, and then I said, okay, what have I not been doing? Well, I've not been creating any kind of content, so I need to get back on this wagon. So what I decided to do was I said, okay, I'm going to live stream every single day for the month of November, or at least every weekday, and just see how that goes. And so I did. So, and it was hard because for the first while I had content planned. I had old blog posts and things that I said, okay, I can turn this into a live stream. And then I started to run out of those, and then I started to have to kind of, go to the well and dig up some, like, create new content, and these were all solo episodes, so me speaking directly to camera like this. So, but yeah, it was a really great exercise to have to do. It really upped my game. I improved my my video setup a bit. Still not amazing, but I improved it a bit. And I've worked on that a lot more since then. And yeah, but it was really useful. Just because I needed to challenge myself. I needed to start creating content. I needed to, like, the only way to improve is to do, Yeah. So if you want to get better at writing blog posts, write more blog posts. You want to get better at doing video, do more video. So so that was what that was about. I did find it really useful, though.
Can you point to any tangible benefits for your business from that effort, particularly?
I don't know if I got any clients from it. I may have. I certainly got a lot of support from people saying, "Hey, listen, we see what you're doing. That's really cool. Keep it up. It's good work." And that was good. I got a lot of kudos and claps on the back kind of stuff, and that was nice to get, because sometimes you feel like you're kind of shouting into the void when you're online.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it spurred me on to do other things then. Like, for example, the next thing I wanted to do was actually start the podcast. And I think that was what got me to the point is, okay, now I've done this, I can now do the podcast. So it kind of, that was the next step.
Warm up. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is it? I may be just speaking for myself here. So if I'm the only one, tell me in the comments. But why is it so hard to sell ourselves? Like, maybe we can sell everything else, but when it comes to ourselves, it's just painful.
Well, we don't want to blow our own trumpet, right?
No, we don't.
I think that's the big thing. It's like, and I think there's for a certain type of people, like, we're not natural salespeople. Right. There are the natural salespeople and the people who will talk your ear off, and like, I'm not a natural extrovert. I have trained myself to fake extrovert very good, but I'd much rather be in a dark room or reading a book or something on my own.
Yeah, me too.
But there are other reasons why selling the specific things that we're selling is harder as well. So, for example, when we're selling consulting service in particular, what we're selling is invisible. So people can't pick it up and kind of knock on it to check the quality. Our clients don't want to talk about it. The work that we did for them, because they were in a place where they had a problem. It might have been an embarrassing problem, might be something they don't want to talk about. They want to present themselves well to the world, so they don't want to talk about the insides of the problems that they had. And so what we're selling is actually invisible, and it's hard. It's complex, and it needs some explanation, and so that makes it difficult for people to compare. And so in their, like, our clients are trying to make purchase decisions about consulting and any kind of consulting service. They're trying to make complex comparisons in their head, and they're trying to use shortcuts to make that easier for themselves. Another thing that people often forget is, you're not selling a bar of chocolate. You're selling a relationship. When you're entering into a consulting engagement, it's literally called an engagement. So, like, it's not a quick transaction. You're not buying something off the vending machine. So, and clients know that. So they want to test out, and they want to make sure that they know, like, and trust you. So there's that part as well, particularly, for stuff like business coaching and things like that. There's more reasons, by the way.
Okay.
Consulting projects are quite often transformative. So you're taking somebody from one place to another place, and that transformation is sometimes quite complex. It's quite a big transformation, and that usually involves risk. And so, if you're working with an employee in a company, maybe their job's on the line, or if you're working with the business owner, maybe their business is on the line. And so, I mean, that's the way people feel when I'm working with them on specialization. You know, they feel their entire business is potentially at risk if they make the wrong decision. So, they need a lot of trust before they work with me on that. So,
True.
You know, other things, you know, everybody believes their project is different, and that makes it a bit more difficult. Pricing is difficult in the world of consulting because it's not a commodity. It's much harder to figure out what the value of this is. And I think a big part of it comes back to, you know, you're selling yourself, and that's hard. So yeah. So there's a lot of different reasons bundled up as to why it's really difficult.
Yeah, I can see that. And Brian, who is from the UK, said human nature. Like, why is it hard to sell ourselves? Human nature, and probably more if you're English or in a similar culture.
Yeah. I think the English, all of the Brits, I think the Irish, I think even in Australia they have things called tall poppy syndrome. You know, you don't want to be the tall poppy, you get cut down.
It's a very New England thing as well. I grew up in Maine, and it's very New England.
Yeah. So yeah, there is that, but like you have to sell yourself ultimately. Like and so for me, it's much easier way to sell yourself is to write a blog post or create a podcast or, you know, do that kind of stuff than you know, send a cold email or send a cold LinkedIn message or you know, go to networking meetings at 6 a.m. in some horrible hotel. You know, I have gone to a few of those things, and oh my god, that is just not for me. If I joined any of those networks, I would be kicked out because, you know, I couldn't follow those rules.
Yep, me too. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I love that answer though. How do you get over selling yourself? You don't have to, right? You instead you're kind of giving of yourself and letting people make that connection.
Liston Witherell renamed his brand to Serve, Don't Sell. And I love that. It's just such a great way of summarizing the whole thing. You know, you're
fantastic.
And ultimately, I did I think I did a YouTube video last week on this. When somebody was talking to me, they asked me, you know, they were saying, oh, I don't want to be salesy. And I heard this phrase salesy, and I hate that word. And so the issue was, the issue is like salesy is this kind of aggressive sales approach that you see in Hollywood, like you see in Glengarry Glen Ross and stuff like that. And it's like, that's not sales in the real world. And in the world that we're in, mostly sales is really easy. If you're doing it the way that I would like to do it, which is your marketing is you educating the client and putting content out there for your potential clients to read and educate themselves about the problem. And then when they approach you, the sales meeting is really simple. It's just checking to see, are they a good fit for the solution that you have? And if they are a good fit, then yes, work with them. And if they're not a good fit, refer them to the best person who you can to help them with the problem that they have. And that's it. It's just checking to see if they're a good fit. And that there's nothing salesy about that. You know, it's just, am I able to help you with this? Yeah, I think I can. Here's what I have. Or if it's not a good fit, I don't think I can help you with this, but, you know, go talk to Brian or Lisa or whoever, you know? So I think that's such a much easier way to sell. And you know, it's better for everybody that way.
Yeah, I agree. Holly says that Canadians are too polite. I mean, I think what we're learning is it's okay to be polite.
Yeah.
Okay. And Brian says it works better to say this will solve your problem and not just saying I'm amazing.
Yeah, and if you say I'm amazing, nobody's going to believe it anyway. If somebody else says you're amazing, then that's a different story, you know. But you can't say I'm amazing myself. I just put up a link. I wrote an article about this. Why selling consulting is harder. I just found it, so I gave you a link there.
Okay.
So
I'll share that.
I think it all comes back to trust, and that's the most important thing. There's a heavy dependency in the world of consulting on trust in the relationship because there's so much risk. And that's why referrals are so important in consulting, because if you don't know somebody, then trust is passed with a referral. When somebody recommends somebody else, that they're passing their trust. Your reputation is on the line. They know that you did a good job for John, so you can do a good job for me.
Yeah.
And that's really important when there's risk. And so what we're doing is we're replacing that trust of the referral with our content, with our authoritative education content that teaches them about it, and the content also like this, or like podcasts where somebody's got, they've got your voice literally in their ear, and that creates a lot of trust. The thing called a parasocial relationship, this kind of thing where people trust you because they've heard you over and over again. So I think that that's what it boils down to, really, is building trust.
Right. I'm glad that you circled back around to that, because I was going to say, I thought we said that referrals aren't always that great. But yes, yeah, I totally agree. And is there a way to make referrals better? Like, is there a way to say, hey, client number one, I really want to work with client number two. Would you mind writing something specific for this job? Like, can you do that, or how does that work?
Okay, so yes, and I'm not the right person to help you with that.
Okay. All right.
So it definitely is possible. I know it is, and I know there are people out there who do this. I think Steve Gordon is a guy who talks about that a lot. Okay. And Steve Gordon has a podcast. I can't remember the name of his podcast right now, but I think he does talk about, asking for more referrals and doing, getting better referrals. And there are ways to do that. But, if you've got a small network, or if you've tapped out your network already, or if you like what I had a large network of the wrong people, because I had a large network of small business owners in the west of Ireland. And they would have been great if I wanted to continue working and creating websites for small businesses in the west of Ireland, but that's not what I wanted to do. So they were referring me the wrong types of clients. Mm-hmm. But there are people who are natural introverts, or have, there's people out there who have social anxiety, and they don't want to do the referral thing, so they want to do something else. And also, it's very difficult to control when you're getting those referrals. Yeah. So referrals. I understand why they were so important, and I understand that it can work for a lot of people, but it can also be terrifying to depend on them. If that's like, you're just practicing hope marketing,
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. Okay. So we talked about raising prices.
There's Steve Gordon, Unstoppable CEO. Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Okay.
Great podcast to listen to.
Okay. Fantastic. We talked about how everyone needs to raise their prices, and I love that math. Well, half my clients will quit. Great. If you've doubled your prices, it's the same amount of money for a lot less work. I love that. Now, when you and I talked earlier, weeks ago, we talked about determining pricing and getting away from money for time, or productizing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for getting started with that?
Yeah. So productizing is really interesting. And I've only kind of dipped my toe in the productization waters a little bit, but basically what it's about is it's about creating this fixed price product, where you can actually list your price on your website, mm-hmm. and it's fixed scope. There's no movement on the scope, and so you say to people, look, this is what it is, take it or leave it, and if the value is good enough, then people will go for it, because it's clearly outlined. This is what you're going to get. This is what the price is, and it makes for a very simple decision for the client. That looks like it'll work for us. We like the look of the provider, so let's just make the decision now. And they can actually even pay there and then on the website. Sometimes it can actually be like an e-commerce site, so it's great. I've seen this work. I did it with a website where I had a website in a day product, and it was basically where somebody, I felt, there's an option here for certain types of businesses, which are lead generation businesses, expert businesses. It doesn't cover e-commerce websites.
Okay.
It doesn't cover e-learning websites. It's just purely lead generation website for experts where they have an option for people to go in and download a lead magnet PDF, something like that.
Yeah.
And get hooked up with ConvertKit, and they get a WordPress website with X number of pages, and we would provide a logo for additional cost of X if they don't have a logo, and there you go, and you take it or leave it, and it's all done in one day, you know. And here's the homework you need to do, and if you don't do the homework, we cancel the day of the booking, you know. So it's very simple, and it just makes I think it makes for a nice offering. I think there is a thing where you have custom projects, and then you have these productized services, these packages, and you go when you're starting out, you need to do the custom services so that you can figure out what the pricing should be for the package services.
That's true. Yeah,
you can kind of graduate into those once you kind of get some experience with that. So I think it's something that you don't do straight away, but you can do it a bit later.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I have a couple on my site, and one of them is Pinterest audit and strategy, and it's $14.97. And here's what it involves. And like you said, do you want it or you don't? You know,
it works great for those diagnostic type packages because a lot of people don't want to do diagnosis, and what happens is they want you to come in and commit to doing implementation. And you don't know what the scenario is. So you say, well, look, before we do implementation, I have a diagnostic. This is how much it costs. And the result of that will be, a strategy. And you can then take that strategy to anybody, get them to build it for you. Hopefully you'll still want to work with us on the strategy, but you don't have to. But this is how much the diagnostic costs, and something in there, somewhere between 1 and 5,000 or 6,000 is typically what you'll see for those kind of diagnostics. I think it's a great one for productized service.
Yeah, it's worked out really well. I have one customer in particular, and we did the diagnostic, but then it was like, well, will you come back and check and see how we're doing? And I thought, well, that's a great idea. So I do every month. I look and see, are they doing what I suggested? If they are, is it working? What else can they learn? What trends can we pull in? So that's a recurring offering for me, which is great.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we only have a couple minutes here. I want to mention that I am up to something. I am doing a live workshop on Pinterest advertising because people made me. So if you go to my site, elisameredith.com, there's a banner on the right. You can sign up for that. It's $47. It's an hour plus half an hour of Q&A. So bring your questions. And at the end, I will give you the option to email me with your plan, and I will give you some feedback on that. But it's pretty comprehensive. But if you've never done ads on Pinterest or anywhere else, you can absolutely use this, and you'll be able to create a great campaign when we're done. So we know we can find Alastair at his website, therecognizedauthority.com or specializationpodcast.com. And what else are you working on these days?
Right now, I'm doing a training course on YouTube with a company called Video Creators. So I'm going to be doing more YouTube video releases. So I'm starting to make a bit of progress with that. It's going to be something I think I'm going to enjoy it. I'm starting to work with an editor to add a little bit more, because most of my previous videos were very boring, just me talking to the camera like this. so adding some B-roll and some other stuff like that, and trying to add a little bit more story to the in terms of the kind of the script, rather than just making it purely informational, because that's I tend to go into that kind of engineering. Here's the facts.
Yeah.
So trying to add a bit more interest and tension and stuff like that to it. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be working on next.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, if you're looking for a new podcast, the Recognized Authority is fantastic. Alastair is a great host, and he has fantastic guests. I highly recommend it. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks for everyone for tuning in, and your comments. Always enjoy having you here live. It makes it a lot of fun. So we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks.